Okay, a couple of things here. Bink Only, I've known him a little bit. He was at a dispensary. He worked at a dispensary I used to go to in Spokane. But, he's trying to teach me some kind of a lesson here. He keeps going to the dictionary and saying that I don't understand and that I've offended everybody that are atheist. Or his quote was that I've offended all atheists by saying that most atheists react the way that Steve does. Steve Elliott, which is a video I posted earlier. I'm making this video just because this comes up where he's told me that I've done this and I've done that, but he's got no proof of it. And, I don't want 3 or 4 months to go by and Bink to come back and say, hey, remember when you did this and you did that and you said this and you said that? I'm not going to let him push my buttons because I think his lesson is poorly presented, and I'll explain why. So here's what Bink says. He says, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this light off really quick so that it's easier to read. Bink says here, following your logic, the fact that I've met diehard Christians who are racist proves that all Christians are racist, which is absolutely not true. This is called fallacy of the hasty generalization. And if you reply that they weren't really Christians by your definition, how does he know my definition? I've never stated that. I refer you to the whole page of fallacies at Wikipedia. As I said, I do not wish to censor or only to edify, and your grasp of logic appears tenuous at best. That is not an insult, it is a demonstrable fact. Well, his facts are already wrong because, first of all, he doesn't know my definition of what a Christian is. I don't even define myself as a Christian. I define myself as a student of Jesus. I try to learn from Jesus. I also try to learn from Krishna. I also try to learn from Muhammad and other historical figures, but I'm not a Christian. I don't belong to a church. I'm not a member of any religion. So he's already assuming something that isn't true about me. My definition by your definition, he doesn't even know my definition. I've never presented that as any kind of definition. So then I say to him, following your logic, the fact that I've met diehard Christians who are racist proves that all Christians are racist. I said, which logic is that being? I did state that I don't believe that religion is to blame for all bad things that happen to Steve, but likewise I don't blame all bad things that happen on atheism. I merely pointed out it's not religion that causes these things, it's human nature, my exact words, or did I misunderstand? And Bink says, yes, you misunderstood. You claim that Steve proved your point, that most, see now here's an important word, most diehard atheists don't like to be challenged, which obviously is an overgeneralization, just like my example about racist Christians is obviously an overgeneralization. No, see, Bink, the problem here is that the word you used was all Christians. I said most atheists, and that's from my personal experience, not from a worldly, overall perspective. That's just from, like for example, tonight with Steve. My general experience is that most atheists don't like to be challenged, and I've given 4 different examples of this. And he says, and when they are challenged, they resort to childish insults and censorship. Based on the behavior of one atheist, Steve, in fact, you resorted to childish insults. Again, I urge you to read up on logical fallacies and confirmation bias. Now, the logical fallacy here is that you use the word all, I use the word most, big difference. And then I quoted him, yes, you misunderstood. You claim that Steve proved your point that most diehard atheists don't like to be challenged, which is obviously an overgeneralization. And then I responded, I said, I think it's more about my particular experience. For example, this exchange at Hempfest 2008, where a bunch of atheists confronted this Christian man, and instead of letting him answer their questions, they first set up straw man arguments to make points against him and his religion that were blatantly false, like the dude that said the entire Bible was, quote, written in a dead language, Aramaic. And then when the Christian guy tried to correct his blatant ignorance of the facts, this guy shuts him down and starts talking loudly over the Christian man. My general experience is that atheists need to be right, but they won't concede to being wrong. Instead, they will just censor. And then I gave that link to the Hempfest conversation, where the guy was like screaming over the Christian guy when the Christian guy proved him wrong. And then I said, now as for tonight, Steve Elliott posted, with or without religion, you would have good people doing good things and evil people doing evil things. But for good people to do evil things, that takes religion. From Steve Weinberg. And I said, when I politely debated this with him, no insults coming from my end, he blocks me. And before doing so, he fires off one last insult on my wall. As for your comments, there was no debate. Calling a well-thought-out lecture by a well-accredited educator, quote, gibberish, is not a discussion, a debate, or constructive criticism. It is simple mockery. That is very typical. I mean, very typical. Look at Richard Dawkins telling this man in the crowd that asked him a sincere question that he was hallucinating. I would love for an atheist to prove me wrong about their debate tactics, but so far there are few occasions of civil and thoughtful debate with an atheist. And then I gave that link to Richard Dawkins. And then I asked him here, I quoted him, in fact, you resorted to childish insults. And I said, really? I think that deserves some supportive evidence. And then Bink says, you have ignored every bit of evidence I have offered, which has been my experience with most believers. So now he's generalizing. So anyway, we'll get back to that. Regardless of their faith, and if you'd read up on confirmation bias, you might realize this. Again, all I said was that you overgeneralized, and you gave a link that explains the logical fallacy involved. You have completely ignored this and continued to overgeneralize, and you appear to be assuming that I am an atheist, which I am not. But your preconceived notions, please read upon confirmation bias, have clouded your judgment. Well, actually, Bink, and this is the problem here, is that you clouded my judgment by speaking for, quote, all atheists. Had you not spoken for all atheists, I wouldn't assume that you were included in that group. How can you logically speak for a whole group of people that you're not even a part of? See, that's where the logical fallacy comes in, is that you're trying to speak for an entire group of people when I said most of my experience with atheists has been such and such. I didn't say all, and I didn't say all atheists were this way. I just said most. And that's the difference, like I pointed out earlier, where you were saying that, if you found a couple of racist Christians and then it led you to believe that all Christians were racist, well, that's completely different than what I said. When I said most atheists react this way, I was speaking most, not all, and from my particular experience, not from everybody's. So there's a logical fallacy involved here, but Bink, it has to do more with you than my conversation. And then Dennis Ford and Bink are talking about the Bible and stuff, assuming that that's, my plane of existence, going on and on about it. And then I quote him here in response to what he said earlier. Quote, you have now ignored every bit of evidence I offered, which has been my experience with most believers, regardless of their faith. And if you'd read up on confirmation bias, you might realize this. Again, all I said was that you overgeneralized. My response is, I don't think I have. I didn't say all atheists are this way, only most. And I base that on my personal experiences, which I just demonstrated on 3 different occasions of. If I include your mockery, that is 4. And I would only include his mockery if he was an atheist. I'm not saying here that he is, but he appears to be when he's speaking for all atheists. Just in one night, there have been 2 very clear cases of non-debate style mockery. So empirically proven by just tonight, 2 of 2 prove my most assertion being correct. If it would be correct if it was, or it would be great if it was 50-50, but it was not. Tell me again where I overly generalized. You made the statement but offer no proof. So if you mean about my comment regarding most atheists, you have not proven anything, just that most of the atheists that I have debated with act like this, which I clearly offered proof of. Dennis Ford's talking about the Bible. We'll do that one another time. And Bink says, he quoted me, non-debate style mockery. And he says, and you obviously haven't a clue what empirically proven means. As I said, I am not an atheist, and you most certainly overgeneralized, and you most certainly have not read any of the links I sent you, or you would not continue exhibiting such ignorance. Here's another one that you need to read up on, straw man arguments. He says, yes, I've read the Bible, the Quran, Upanishad, Veda, Buddhist Sutras, Lao Tzu's, Norse and Irish epics, and volumes of shamanism, primitive language. Can you just check out a little bit of logic and rationality, and I'm trying to edify you with? And again, quit assuming that I'm an atheist. They are as irrational as any Bible thumper. And he says, please look up the definition of rational before you go all self-righteous on me. And I quoted him, again, quit assuming I'm an atheist. They are as irrational as any Bible thumper. And I said, to him, which is something that Steve makes the case of mistaking me as. In my video, I point out quite clearly that I read from most of the major religious texts, and I am not a member of any religion or church. Now, sorry for assuming that you were an atheist, as you took it upon yourself to speak for atheists earlier. Quoting him, he says, You insulted all atheists by claiming they don't like to be challenged. When they are challenged, they resort to childish insults and censorship. Based on the behavior of one atheist, Steve, in fact, you resorted to childish insults. Now, you made a straw man argument. This is my response to him. Now you made a straw man argument while we're on the topic, where I quoted him, You insulted all atheists by claiming they. And I corrected him, and I said, I didn't say all atheists, did I? And I quote him again. He says, And please look up the definition of rationale before you go all self-righteous on me. And I respond to him, the self-righteousness is coming from your end, first claiming that I have offended all atheists, in essence speaking for them, when you yourself claim you are not one. You should look up in the dictionary self-righteous while we're involved in dictionary lessons. And then I said, for example, when I report on the position of a Bible-believing Christian, I do not speak for them. I use their own words and let them speak. And I showed that video of where that Christian man was taking on the atheist at Hempfest. And I said, when you assume that I have, quote, offended all atheists, you are in essence taking on their feelings and speaking for them. That is something I wouldn't impose myself as doing. And I go on here and quote him. Oh no, this is that's to Dennis. And then I post another video. Here's another video that I don't claim to be with any affiliation, religion, or church. I have tons of those videos where I claim that I am not a member of any church, I'm not a member of any religion, I do seek knowledge, I am a disciple of Jesus, I'm a student, but I'm also a student of Krishna, Vishnu, Shiva, so many others. And it's not just one religion or the other, and it's not just one membership or the other. I have no memberships, I have no affiliations. So we can just put an end to all that crap. When it comes to overgeneralization, I think Bing is as guilty as me, if not quite a bit more, by assuming all atheists are offended by me saying most atheists respond to me in a certain way. Most does not equal all, and if you're not an atheist, you really can't speak for all atheists and say that they're all offended. Anyway, peace, Bink. Take care. What I've found is that a lot of us are really talking about the same God. And, I learned that Hindus and Christians are very much alike, and obviously Jews and Muslims are very much like Christians. But the Hindu thing is really interesting, the way that it lines up. You look at these deities, you look at Krishna, you look at Ganesh, you look at Shiva, you look at all these different deities, but what they are is really just a representation of Vishnu, kind of like how Jesus was a representation of Elohim. You look at reincarnation, and you look at resurrection, very similar. You look at karma and sin, very similar. You look at all of the paths of knowledge in the Bible. You compare that to the Bhagavad Gita, and you see a lot of similarities. You see a lot of similarities in the character and personages of Vishnu and Elohim, very similar. And these are two different religions, two different sides of the world. I honestly think they're talking about the same God. Coincidentally, I don't think so. I think it's very obvious why. It's because that God really does exist, and all of these cultures around our world have taught about him. Native Americans, Hindu folks, people in Papua New Guinea, Europeans, Chinese. It's really interesting. The biblical language is very much found in ancient Chinese. There's a couple of links on the internet. You might have to look for it, but if you look for in Google, if you look for Chinese text Bible lessons or something like that, but there's lessons within the Chinese text and the way they're made up, and it's very interesting. I'll have to post that at XCannabis or probably behindzioncurtain.com or something, and show that, because it's very, very compelling. But we can all learn to get along, and I think with the cannabis community, it's just like with religion. Most of these religions are really just talking about the same God in a different way. Well, with the cannabis consumers and activists, we're really talking about the same thing, the same goal, which is freedom. We just want freedom. That's what we all want. And, there's nothing wrong with that. We just need to find middle ground. And I ask for blessings upon this community, for us to all get along and for us to be guided in a positive way. And, that's what I'm putting out in the universe. I'm hoping that it reaches, to where it needs to be. And bless up, and good talking with you. All right, now this was supposed to be a debate about Christianity without insults, and that didn't happen. But I had a little debate with Steve Elliott where he had kind of said, negative things about religion. He said, with or without religion, you would have good people doing good things and evil people doing evil things. But for good people to do evil things, that takes religion, a quote by Steven Weinberg. And I basically just said, I think that human nature is responsible for people doing bad things, whether they're in a religion or not. Atheism, under Stalin's rule, had the same problems. State atheism was enforced by the Russian government, and yet between 4 million and 60 million people were killed as a result. Those people were religious people. They were killed based on their religion because of state-enforced atheism. I don't think all atheists are bad, and I don't think everybody in the Russian government was bad. I think that it's an individual thing, and it's a human nature thing. But then Dennis Ford said that he wanted to debate me about religion. I said I would like a debate with an atheist that doesn't give insults and doesn't offer censorship, because Steve Elliott blocked me after I had made some comments. I don't think they were at all offensive, and I don't think there was any call for blocking me, but I just mentioned that on my page that I would like an atheist to debate me, and Dennis Ford stepped up and said he'd do it. And later on he said that he wasn't an atheist at the end of the debate. He's saying that a lot of the BS about how to properly argue, but no real information, semantics, but no substance, this is the thing that, we just went back and forth. It was like, I'm trying to get the conversation on track, and he's telling me, oh, well, you're bullshit Bible this, you're bullshit Bible that. So I'm like, well, as far as the Bible is concerned, and I do read from it as well as I read from the Bhagavad Gita and the divine books of the Nation of Islam and ancient Cherokee and Hopi writings as well. My wife is Cherokee, and I said the thing with the Bible is that based on the Dead Sea Scrolls and other writings that we've found in the 1940s, we can verify that the Bible that was written 2,000 years ago is the same Bible we have now, and vice versa, because the texts complement each other. So we went back and forth on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he changed, different, how many texts there were, and, offered criticism about my support for it, and this and that. But when it comes down to it, I basically said all the time since 2002, since I really started reading about religion, that I don't belong to any church. I'm not a Christian. I don't have any, religious ideals, because I don't subscribe to any religion, and I'm not a member of any church. But I do take, knowledge from history. I don't believe the Bible is 100% correct. I don't believe it's, directly from God, nor do I believe any other text is. I believe it's man's interpretation of God. But, I basically just tried to keep the debate going. It just never works out. It seems like when you debate somebody that hates Christianity, if you have any akin to it, like I do, I still try to follow the teachings of Christ, even though I don't claim to be a Christian or religious. I still try to follow his teachings. And because of that, it's like the insult fest continues and continues, and you can see that on the screen here, what I'm showing. And, I feel bad that, other Christians have to go through this. There's a video from HempFest 2008 where 5 or 6 atheists surrounded this Christian guy and just started yelling at the guy One guy was like, "Oh, your Bible's bullshit because it was written on based on a dead language, which is Aramaic." And the guy's like, "No, there may have been one book in the Bible, which is the book of Matthew, written in Aramaic, but the Old Testament was written in Hebrew." And this guy was like, "No, it was written in Aramaic. We all know it was written in Aramaic," over and over. And these people that just try to share knowledge, Christians or Muslims or whoever else, that just try to share what they believe, not trying to force anybody to believe it, but just there to answer questions for people like this guy was at HempFest. Man, they go through hell. And I guess that's kind of what motivates me to stand up and, claim my beliefs and ideals publicly, so that, this isn't such a scary thing to be a Christian or to be a Jew or to be a Muslim, because other people support them as well. I'm one that isn't a member of their churches, but I still believe that they have some good principles, and so I stand up for those principles and stand up for what I believe in. And some of the things I believe in coincide with what they believe in, so I think it's my duty to stand up and declare that. There's a lot of just bickering, and that's kind of why I got into standing up for all this and just being accountable for it, because it's like, if we could possibly make some sort of good situation out of a negative social aspect of this divide in our country, atheist versus Christian or religious versus non-religious, I think we could all make a lot more difference together as one united front rather than being divided. And I see so much division, especially in the cannabis movement, and I've been particularly interested in that, but just in other things as well. And I think that hinders our ability to get things done in politics, in regards to social welfare of our community. I mean, just to be able to pull together and unite. I think that the divisions between us need to be fixed, and that's part of why I talk about this, and that's why I always try to give credit to the Muslims, to the Hindu, to the Christian. I don't favor one or the other. I try to favor them all, and I like to see unity happen, so I continue to make at least some effort to bridge those gaps. And with the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is another one. This is just a chronological order of our discussion that's on the screen here, but he's talking about, the Dead Sea Scrolls is an excellent example. It was a document that fell right in line with what they wanted, so they released it to the public. If those documents contradicted anything they said, or maybe parts of it did, and we didn't get to see it unearthed, they were locked away or destroyed. Notice they took a decade to release the information about him. That's because they spent so many years under intense scrutiny to ensure they didn't have any contradiction to your Christian stories. Again, he's calling me a Christian, where over and over and over in the debate I've said that I'm not a Christian. But besides that, think about the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's over 30,000 fragments that make up the Dead Sea Scrolls. These are fragments that were written on animal hides that were fragile and delicate. And if you think about ancient art restoration, how long does that take to restore? Or documents like the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. I mean, restoring ancient documents isn't an overnight process. It's not like you unearth these from the ground, you open them up, and there you go. Everybody gets to get access to these. Fact is, though, there was a photographer who was part of the archaeological dig, and they took pictures of these scrolls and took pictures of a lot of the text, and that was released to the public. It's just with the delicate nature of these documents, they didn't release them right away. They held on to them, they restored them, they were carefully piecing them together, and then eventually, after the puzzle was completed, they did release them. And you can look at them now. There's over 900 total documents. Here's what I said. I said, that's because they spent so many years. I was quoting him. That's because they spent so many years under intense scrutiny to ensure they didn't have any contradiction to your Christian stories. And I said, that's an incredible claim with absolutely zero proof. I mean, nobody's got proof that the Dead Sea Scrolls were destroyed, modified, or hidden. I mean, almost all of the Old Testament, minus a book or two, if I remember, I think a part of Deuteronomy, if I remember, was not completed. But most of them were complete. And there was some extra books too. I think the book of Jasher was found, a book that we hadn't had before. So instead of removing books from the Bible, we actually got new ones. So, in some regards, there were missing things in the Bible, but now some of those missing parts have been restored. And then as far as, he says as far as Genesis 18, he asked earlier if, how was it that other stories of Jesus came out 1,500 years before Jesus was actually born. And I just used Genesis 18. Genesis 18 talks about a man who was equal to God who came and spoke with Abraham. And, in Colossians 1, verse 15 through 20, it basically says that Jesus was created before the earth was created. Jesus, existed before all things. And then in Genesis 18, it shows how Jesus did arrive, and or somebody akin to God, a supreme being, came and Abraham bowed to his knees and called him Lord, and most people believe that was Jesus Christ in the Old Testament. Same with Melchizedek. So there's a lot of stories in the Old Testament that show how Jesus was present 1,500 years before his arrival. And then I said. I don't know what this was. I think this was about the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I just think that, the whole idea that the Dead Sea Scrolls was mangled or missing things or destroyed or altered, I just think that's an incredible claim that demands a lot more proof. At the end of this, there should be a few more things about the conversation that I didn't include that basically was like, fuck you and your Christianity and this and that, and quite honestly it was just too much to really debate. I mean, it's like, are you serious? Do we really need to go over these petty insults anymore? And then he says when I asked him for proof about the Dead Sea Scrolls being altered, he says, you stated your Bible as proof, which is BS and unacceptable as proof. Why are you trying to ask me for so much proof? Let's see one bit of proof what I'm saying isn't true. Well, and I showed him, we have almost the entire Bible contained in the Dead Sea Scrolls. If it was altered or missing documentation or somehow incomplete or changed, that would be obvious by now. The Dead Sea Scrolls have been released. Almost all of the Bible is contained within those scrolls from the Old Testament, and, if anything was missing, we would know it. If the book of Psalms wasn't there, we would know it. If, the book of Genesis wasn't there, we would know it because we have something to compare it to. I don't know how else to explain this to him. But I did comment, and let's see here. I said, you stated your Bible, I quoted him, you stated your Bible as proof, which is BS and unacceptable as proof. I said, no, I used the test of time as proof. For 1,000 years, naysayers said, the Bible can't be correct, it has been changed by the Catholics. But when the Dead Sea Scrolls were unearthed, which in fact there are over 30,000 documents available to be reviewed, none of them were in contradiction to what we currently have. Certainly there weren't time travelers that went back in time and changed everything. And the point is that the people that disagreed with the Bible, whether they were of a different religion or whether they were atheist, or whether they were in some government position and didn't like, that they, some of the doctrines in the Old Testament or something that they were being held to, like King Henry, marriage and divorce and things like that. If these people who didn't like the Bible were changing it, it would be obvious, because these books, these scrolls, weren't unearthed until 1945. And if they were changed or altered, we could compare it to what we currently have to what was unearthed and see if it had been changed. That just isn't the case. He says here, the Dead Sea Scrolls were started to be found in the first cave in 1949, and around 11 caves in all throughout 1956. The scrolls were not released to the public until after 1956. That left religious scholars 8 years to study the scrolls before anyone in the world knew of them. Again, one more, all of it was handed over to Christians and the Hebrews to censor first. Also, there were 972 texts, not 30,000, There were probably 30,000 before the Christians got their hands on them. And again, something with no proof, but I said basically that, if you look at ancient art, this is where I was basically talking about ancient art, but if you look at ancient art and you look at what it takes to restore ancient art that have been maintained over the years, it takes a long time to restore art. You don't just crack it open and hand it out to the religious people to scrutinize. I mean, you have to first piece all these, different fragments together to complete the puzzle, because they weren't all just one document. They were many different little fragments that had came apart. And then you piece them together, you restore them, and you present it. And that's what happened. But like I said, I mean, these things were all filmed before they were actually released, and that film is reviewable as well. But the fact is, and I said this several times, that and I'll just read it again. I said, you keep referring to religion. To debate me, I have to only mention that I believe in intelligent design. I study ancient writings, but I do not worship any of them, which I pointed out in the video that I posted in this thread that I made years ago. And these are the points. 1, I do not have a church membership. 2, I do not claim any religion. 3, as far as spiritual beliefs go, I study all of them that I get my hands on. But I do not worship any of them. 4, my belief in God is limited to the idea that we were created. Which I pointed out in the video that I posted in this thread that I made years ago. Anyway, these are the points. 1, I do not have a church membership. 2, I do not claim any religion. 3, as far as spiritual beliefs go, I study all of them that I get my hands on. And 4, my belief in God is limited to the idea that we were created. Anyway, I'm definitely interested in all the different history of the world, but I'm not a dogmatic subscriber of it, so what can I say? Peace to you, and happy Independence Day. This is another thing that I am very well aware of with this particular individual, is that his affiliation with Normal is significant because Kevin Oliver and Angela Johnson, both directors of Normal, have, without provocation, attacked my religious beliefs as well. Now, it seems like, and now I only can speak to these 3 people, but it seems like everybody in the Spokane Normal chapter are atheist, and militant atheist, at very least, from their responses to me, which I also have recorded from past conversations. But here's just a perspective that I have seen from Hempfest, where atheists will congregate around a Christian and yell obscenities, if not just loud notions, at their direction. Even if they're false, they will just scream them down in public. And I just think that this is a common and most typical way of their militant style behavior for their beliefs.
So do you stone to death disobedient children? I see you. Do you wear clothing made of 2 different weaves?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you wear clothes made of 2 different weaves? Do you stone to death disobedient children?
Well, first of all, you're quoting 2 different verses, okay?
Yeah.
We have to realize there's 2 kinds of laws in the Bible, okay? We have moral laws and symbolic laws. Okay?
So how can you symbolically stone to death a child?
No, that's a moral law.
Okay, so you have to stone to death.
So you do. So
well, let's do one. We're doing one at a time. The first one you said was about wearing 2 different weaves. Okay, that's a symbolic law. A symbolic law. Once Christ came, He did away with the symbolic laws.
I'm not going to have enough time to make this whole presentation, but I just wanted to correct this man who believes, who is trying to convict this Christian man, that the Old Testament and the New Testament are one and the same, and that if you're a Christian, you're living under the laws of the Old Testament, and that you should be, tried and persecuted for those things that are horrible in the laws of Moses. And, he's saying, well, would you stone your kid? Would you, Do you wear fabrics of two different fibers and blah blah blah, and he's taking all these things from the Old Testament. Well, there's got to be known a difference, because there is a difference. If you look up Exodus 24, there's two different laws that they're spoken about. You look in Hebrews 24:7, and you see he took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people and said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do and obey. And see, this is the Israelites agreeing to the covenant, okay? They're not just getting it forced upon them, they're saying, okay, we agree to this. And if they didn't agree to it, they could go elsewhere. But they agreed to it, they stayed, they lived under the laws of Moses, blah blah blah. So it wasn't forced on them, it was something they all agreed to. And then you go down a couple of verses, and you go to Exodus 24:12, and it says, "And the Lord said to Moses, Come up to me in the mount and be there, and I will give thee tablets of stone, and the law and the commandment which I have written, and thou mayest teach them." And see, so he was saying in Exodus 7 that he was going to, or that he had given him a book of the covenant, and they agreed to it. And then he says that he's going to give them another set of commandments, or at least he's going to solidify what he's given them on stone, and let them, be brought to the people, so they last forever or whatever. And so he did that. And if you read on to the following chapters, Moses went up, got the tablets, brought them back down. Noticed that everybody was worshiping false idols again. They were fearing Pharaoh, because Pharaoh was chasing them and trying to, attack them and kill them. And they had just been let out of his bondship. They were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and they had just been freed. And they've attributed that to God, to Elohim, and then Elohim was like, okay, well, here's something to govern you and to to give you acceptance into my kingdom, basically. Here's my mercy and grace. And he gave him the original tablets. And then Moses came down and saw him worshiping this false idol and broke those tablets, and then went up and got something else. And what God gave him there was the ability to, and this is my opinion, you can't find a lot of the documentation for this in the Bible. You just kind of have to fill in between the lines. So this is my interpretation. But what happened after he broke those tablets is he went up and got new tablets. And I believe that was God saying, hey, if they don't want me, if they want Baal, or they want Pharaoh, or they want some of these false idols, how about you lead them, Moses? How about you give them the laws? How about you teach them? And that's why we call it the laws of Moses, not the laws of God. And eventually that would be replaced by Christ in Hebrews 7, where they say the law made nothing perfect. You can see in Hebrews 7:12, for the priesthood being changed, there is also made necessity of a change also of the law. Let's see. And it is far more evident for that after the similitude of Melchizedek there rises another priest, who is made not after the law of carnal commandment, but after the power of an endless life. For he testified, Thou art a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. For there is verily a disannulling of the commandment going before the weakness and unprofitableness thereof. For the law made nothing perfect, but the bringing of the in a better hope did, which we draw nigh unto God, inasmuch as not without an oath he was made priest. And see, Hebrews 7:22, by so much was Jesus made the surety of a better testament. And see, this is the thing. Jesus sacrificed once and for all. And it goes on to that, and it says, For such a high priest became us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and made higher than the heavens, who needeth not daily, as those high priests, to offer up a sacrifice, first for his own sins, and then for the people's. For he did this once, when he offered up himself. For the law maketh men high priests which have infirmity, but the word of the oath, which was since the law, maketh the Son, who is consecrated forevermore. And see, that's the disannulling of the Old Testament. So if these people can't, say Christians should be held to a standard of the Old Testament, when we don't even follow the Old Testament, it has been annulled. There is no Old Testament. As far as doctrine is concerned, that's all been put under the bridge. That's water under the bridge. You know, whatever happened with the Hebrew people, and whatever their rebellion was, and whatever their punishment was, or whatever God designed for them, does not apply to those who believe in Jesus. Because if we believe in Jesus, we believe that Jesus annulled the law, annulled the priesthood, and replaced it with a better covenant, which I believe was given already in Exodus 24:7. It just wasn't, it didn't stick because the people rebelled and started worshiping false idols. And so, you know, that's why we didn't get the laws that Jesus gave us back in Exodus. We got those later because, you know, God wanted us to learn a lesson. You know, if we didn't want Him, He would give us what we wanted, which was the leadership of a human, of a weak, unprofitable, sinful, corrupt human, which was Moses. You know, and Moses had many issues. You know, Moses killed a man. Moses rejected God, and when God told him, "You're going to get the priesthood," Moses said no, and then Aaron got it instead. And so, you know, Moses was not perfect, and there was nothing about him, you know, that we should believe that he was perfect. And so there's no reason to believe that the laws of Moses were perfect. And that's why they're called the laws of Moses and not the laws of God. They were the laws of Moses. They were not perfect. And there's no reason for any of these people to be excited about convicting a Christian on the Old Testament, because it just is unapplicable. It doesn't make any sense. So let's go on.
He did away with the symbolic laws. The moral laws are still in force.
Well, what was the point of the symbolic law?
The symbolic law was to communicate internal truths in such a way that they're deeply impressed upon the conscience of man.
So why couldn't you just
So for
why didn't you
example,
tell us?
a passage.
Okay, well then let me say this. You said that the first one was symbolic, and you told me the symbolism there. Why didn't he just tell you right up front what he meant instead of using a symbol?
It's the same reason we have art. We artists
But
create
art is a human thing.
No.
Shouldn't God just say blatantly that
Well,
this is what you do?
but I'm saying
He
the
did in the
principle
Ten
is-
Commandments.
The principle is the same. The reason that we have art is so artists can communicate some very important truths in a very vivid way that really impresses upon us what that artist is trying to communicate.
Except a lot of art uses interpretation, and so every different person would have a different interpretation of it. So that means that the law is not necessarily concrete.
If that was the only thing he did, that would be true. But God didn't just give the symbolic laws. In conjunction with the symbolic laws, he gave them commands. In other words, he actually told them, do not...
How can the whole religion, based in a book that was written in a language that was dead for 1,000 years, when they found the scrolls, the Greeks found the scrolls, how can you base your entire life off of a non-translatable book?
You know, which language do you think was dead?
It's the Aramaic that was written in.
It wasn't...
It was written in Aramaic, my friend. We all know it. We all know it was written in Aramaic.
No,
The Greeks interpreted it as they thought it was, and when the parts they couldn't interpret, they basically added it themselves.
It was... The Old Testament was written in Hebrew.
Aramaic,
No,
my friend.
Hebrew.
Yes, it was written in Aramaic.
The only New Testament book that may have been written in Aramaic was the Book of Matthew. It's the only one.
The
Old
Exodus is written in Aramaic, my friend. The
Hebrew.
whole book basically is written in Aramaic.
Haven't you
Actually, here is a perfect example of people who absolutely know nothing about the Bible and yet fight bitterly against people who believe in it. And if they just took a minute to listen instead of trying to speak over somebody, they might learn something. But the Bible was not entirely written in Aramaic. This guy is absolutely off his rocker. He doesn't know crap about the Bible. You know, he says he knows about the Dead Sea Scrolls. Well, if he read the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are the most ancient writings that we have to record the Bible, you know, found in the Dead Sea, you know, near Israel, you'll find that it was all written in Hebrew. It wasn't written in Aramaic. I mean, that was a stupid point to begin with, but just to claim that it was written in Aramaic, and Aramaic is a dead language, and how can we trust the Bible? We can trust the Bible because not only do we have what we have now, but we can compare it to what was written 2,000 years ago, 2,200 years ago, and such from the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, those Dead Sea Scrolls predate Christ, and so we can compare and see not only has nothing been changed, but things have been translated accurately. People just need to spend a little more time listening and a whole lot less time talking and talking over people.